Welcome to Business Notes. I'm your host, Diane Bogino. My guest today is Dr. Felicia Farrara. Dr. Farrara is an international speaker, author, and psychologist who consults with agencies and individuals on building positive relationships at home and work. Dr. Ferrara has experience working in crisis resolution and trauma adjustment. This foundation affords her the ability for maximizing potential in all levels of career and leadership. As a consultant to state and private organizations, she has spoken on many aspects of adjustment, motivation, and pushing through adversities. Here's Dr. Ferrara to share her wisdom on how she can help you as an individual or in your organization. Felicia, welcome to the show, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Diane. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
It's great to see you again. So tell our audience, what drew you to the profession of psychology and the phases of that work?
Yeah, I often wondered, and sometimes I think we're preordained to pick one, but as a child, I was always wondering why people did what they did. And let's face it, we all have parents that do some crazy things too. And I'm like, what? Why would they do that? And so that question lingered all the time. And right through high school, you know, I'd see girls have a fit over a breakup with a boyfriend or whatever, cry. And I'm like, oh, why is she acting that far out about it? You know, and so to understand some of these things, I guess I was just naturally drawn to the field of psychology. And I enjoy it. I found out I had some great professors that were very exciting to listen to, and they kind of reinforced my love of psychology.
And what aspects of working with other people do you enjoy the most?
Obviously, the interaction, the one-to-one interaction. I do respect other people's privacy, so I am privileged that people share these personal stories and their personal feelings with me, and I'm very careful to be respectful of that, because that's like a very tender gift that they're sharing with you, and I need to acknowledge that. But yeah, so that one-to-one interaction. And then of course, what you really love is the end result. If you're successful, they should move along the ladder of potential. So if they can raise their potential level, I feel I've done my job.
And what phases of your career have you found to be the most rewarding?
When I see people change, and sometimes it doesn't have to be a big change. And I remember one little boy, he was arrested for something. He was in the juvenile hall, and I had to go see him for the court. And his shoulders were so slumped, and he was so down. And he had a very odd name. And I said to him, you know, I kind of study names because I see them. I said, what heritage are you? And he was American Indian. It was an American Indian name. And his shoulders were down. And he said, it doesn't matter though. We're all alcoholics. And I'm like, what? I said, oh no. I said, and I had just come back from Sedona. I had done a shaman walk and study out in Sedona. And I said, oh no. I said, American Indians, no. I said, they're very, very gifted. They have a lot of intuition. They're not alcoholics. His father was an alcoholic. They actually made him sleep outside in a tent because he had a girlfriend over. So the boy was put in a tent in the backyard. So that's how bad this boy's exposure was. So in his mind, all American Indians are alcoholic. As soon as I said, oh no, I said, they're gifted. You have to go to the library and read about that. And I gave him some examples, and I'm telling you, his shoulders just came up like 3 inches. I'm not kidding you. What, really? And he was so defeated, and to see just a few words could bring a little bounce of life back into him and a little bit of hope. So those moments are very rewarding to me, and I've had several of those incidents. So it's really, for me, it's very rewarding, and I save everything. I mean, I have things from 1980s when somebody in high school had to be sent to had a breakdown and had to be sent to Baker Act. Well, we call it Baker Act in Florida, when you involuntary hospitalization for them. And he went there, and as crafts, he did a dozen eggs, all painted real fancy, and he gave me those. I still have those. I have something another young lady did. She had to go in foster care, and I helped her go look at the foster home first. And things like that I treasure. Those are my treasures. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very meaningful. So are there other professions or career choices that were potential options for you?
Because I started in the schools, and because the kids got arrested so often, I ended up getting involved in the court system and the policies. And so, yes, it would have been law, definitely would have been law. The only thing that held me back was it's so daunting. And I thought to myself, God, the lawyers have to be there right on time because they get in big trouble with the judges. They have to be there. Everything in their cases are time constraints. And the truth is, the attorneys that I work with now, they say the same thing. And it's like they're overwhelmed. I mean, it's a time, the crunch, you have to be there. And if you're not there, and your papers better be ready, and you better use the right form, and you better type it with no typos. And it's like critical, critical, critical. And just this week, I had a conversation with a 33-year-old young lawyer. And he said to me, gosh, Doc, I am so overwhelmed. He says, I can't handle it. It's coming at me from all directions. I got so many cases and I have so many details. And he had a young family. And I told him, you can only handle one at a time and stay focused. And you have to try to compartmentalize. But I see the lawyers go through this all the time. And when they make a wrong decision, or for instance, in a divorce case, we had a man here, you might have heard of it on the news, but they were going through a divorce, and the man actually took his 5-year-old daughter and threw her over our bridge, the Sun Pass Bridge. Yeah, he killed her. And the lawyer almost had a breakdown because she beat herself up for the fact that she could not see she didn't see how bad he was, that how deteriorated his mental health was. So lawyers need a lot of pep talk too. They're dealing with gut-wrenching decisions all the time. So law profession for me would have been my alternative, but I'm kind of glad I didn't go that route.
I imagine that background is helpful today, though, regardless. But what made you return to college mid-career?
Yeah, that's a good question. And how many people do that, right? I'd go back again. I love to learn. I'd go back and do some more. I went back that time because my first degree was a more practitioner oriented. So we didn't do a whole lot of reading of the literature and discussing about if a research article is authentic or not. And so that bothered me. Because you get cases sometimes for the first time you've ever been faced with them. And you say to yourself, okay, what do I do? How do I help this client? And I have to look up whatever is involved in that case. So if it's an illness like muscular dystrophy or something like that, or if it's a legal case, how were they handled in other cases? I can do legal research as well. So I went back to school for that. And in order to analyze a research article, you have to understand the statistics that were used to create it. So basically, it's a lot of statistics and a lot of reviewing of conclusions and sample sizes and everything with that. And that's how you evaluate if an article is authentic or not. And the big thing in today's world is everybody relies on what we call peer-reviewed journals. So that means another colleague looked at it and thought it was worthwhile publishing. So it's kind of the credence of the cases now. Peer-reviewed, evidence-based decisions.
Yeah, and not only did you expand your education, but you're also expanding your business a little by including assessments. So tell our audience a little bit about that.
Yes, part of even the statistic program involved studying an assessment center, for instance, the tests that we give, but you, besides developing the assessment center for that company, you need to then do a series of studies of statistics to see if they are statistically valid. And that well played into it. So part of the assessment, it was always part of my early career, but assessments for individuals is so important for in the workplace as well, because for instance, the qualities that you need to do a certain kind of job, if you're not a good match, you're not going to be a worthwhile employee. So for the company, it really beholds them to assure that their candidate is a good match for the job they have in mind. So back in the 80s, we went back in and did the very thorough, what we call a job description definition. So every job had to be defined. And that was because of American Disabilities Act. So if you hire somebody who has a disability, you have to make sure that you did not hire them for the fact that they weren't qualified for the exact need of the job versus their disability. So you had to kind of look at both areas, and that kind of led quite a bit for doing the assessment part of it. And assessment is everything in the companies now. It helps with employee retention. It helps with employee turnover. It's very expensive just to advertise and interview a candidate. Usually you have to have a multidiscipline team. You have to have objectives, especially if you're in a state or a federal agency. But any company who takes federal dollars for investment also has to abide by the federal rules. So you need to know what they are. And so when you do assessments, you have to keep in mind that how and why you do it within the line of the law. So again, back to the law. The law kind of rides it.
That's right. And I want to talk to you a little bit about relationships because that is something you deal with, and assessments fall into that as well. But what do you think is the biggest mistake that people make when they get into a disagreement or a conflict?
That's such a good question, because life is like that. I always say life is like walking through a minefield. If you step this way, the bomb's going to go off. If you step that way, you'll be okay. So how do you know the difference? It really is like that. But relationships are key for everything, and that's on my business card. It's all relative. It's relative if you're employed. It's relative if you have financial income. It's relative how you carry yourself. And I used to teach both. I used to teach psychology and career development. And the people that came in the career development said, "We don't want to hear that. We don't care about that. We just want to hear about psychology." I said, wait a minute. I said, if you get a depressed client, the best thing you could do for that client is have them get a fulfilling job. And you see how fast that depression goes away. So they're all tied. They're very tied to each other. And of course, a bad job, the other side of that is a bad job could make your depression appear. And so you need to be properly placed. So all of us, when we're looking for jobs, you need to know yourself and what your capabilities are and get on the job. Now, we know that we call it the honeymoon period, when someone's just tired and everybody's nice to you and welcoming you. And then all of a sudden things start to change. So, we try to get the best match, and then sometimes people do change. But so in relationships with each other, whether you're relating to your wife, your spouse, your children, a customer, a coworker, or your top boss, you have to relate in a reasonable manner. And if you don't, there are consequences. So it's a bigger necessity than we think. I think in the old days, they used to have a course in school, in high school, called social values. And a lot of that got into relationships, social change. They don't do that anymore. Now it's more hardcore academics. Mm. And unfortunately, they don't teach communication in school. They don't teach you how to solve a problem with another person. They don't teach you how to, very few places do that. I'm in the South here. They don't do any counseling in a school system, minimal counseling for a child. It has to be a disaster before they apply a counselor. Up north, we did a lot more. The northern states seem to do a lot more counseling, and it helps find people.
Preventative measures, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In your field, I'm not sure that everybody understands that you really can take that field and become an entrepreneur. What was the catalyst that made you start your own business in this?
Working in a system, I was middle management in a state board of education, and you are there day by day, 8 to 4:30. You might be on the road. A lot of I covered a statewide worth of schools, 17 high schools. So you would have to go maybe to the other end of the state for an emergency and then drive back another 2.5 hours. And that was at night. You have to go to certain graduations and programs. You were assigned certain schools. And it was time consuming. It was not a 40-hour-a-week job. It was a 90-hour-a-week job. Mm. And as I said, I had small children at the time. So I made my choice that I would relinquish it and go into private practice. And I've been in private practice for 30 years. So I have run my own business a long time and sustained myself on it. But there's pros and cons to both of it. When you're with a company, you could slack off maybe a little bit more. and when you're in your own business, time is money. So if you waste your time, you're not earning. So there's a different set of pressures, but for me, it works this way.
What advice would you give someone thinking about getting or becoming an entrepreneur that's in your field?
First place, you have to be self-motivated. You have to be up and at it, and you can't wait for somebody to tell you what to do. If you're a lollygagger or you're a procrastinator, don't bother. Don't even bother, because you're not going to keep up with everything. There's a lot to do. Because if you're your own boss, unless you have a set of employees, and that's a different set of problems. If you have a lot of employees, then you've got to cover that. That's a whole nother ball game. That's something you have to take care of. But for most psychologists, they say that it's a good, they say like 45% of your time is spent on billing, because you have to go through each client if you're dealing with insurance. I don't deal with insurance. I deal with private payers, but at the same time, the billing has to be done, and that's a whole nother operation. If your technology breaks down, there's no tech consultant on board. You have to do it yourself. And I find, for me, it helps if I can outsource as much as I can outsource, and then that relieves me of the little problems. But I still have a computer breakdown or whatever. I still need to know where to go to get it fixed, and we have these interruptions. But I have people try to go in their own business, and not within 3 months, they're back on a job.
You did not come from a sales background. Was that a challenge for you in going out and getting clients?
Yes, it's always a challenge to marketing. I'm not so much into the money making part of it, but the actual process of seeing the client, writing the report, doing the assessment, etc. If I'm dealing with a larger company, there is a certain amount of sales involved, because you have to explain what you do and hope that they understand and like it. But that part is always a challenge. Yeah. And it still is. It's very competitive out there. There's a lot of people, and I've lived a long time, so there's a lot more psychologists that graduated after me. So I say, it's a lot of young ones out there, and they might be more energetic. They might be, but for me, I really have the wisdom to be able to see right through an issue and what needs to be done, and hopefully apply the right techniques to it.
Felicia, you have brought the audience some great insights, both into the profession of psychology and, of course, into your business. And I would encourage anyone to give you a call, particularly now. I think people need your services more than ever. And I appreciate your time today so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Diane. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you for watching Business Notes. We've been speaking with Dr. Felicia Farrara, international speaker, author, and psychologist. If you've enjoyed this interview and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button to support this channel. I'm your host, Diane Bogino, bringing you business ideas you can bank on.